Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. Tracy, I'll hand the floor over to you.
Good afternoon. I am Tracy Robinson Williams, for those of you who do not know me, and we want to welcome you to ATARG's After Lunch IT webinar series. I am the technology business strategist for regulated industries for GitLab, and today I'll be taking over for Tom Suter as moderator. Today we'll have some top women leaders in the US military and civilian government talk about how to develop and gain support to build out your vision and make a significant impact on your organization as a leader of one or of a small team. So welcome to all attendees. Special thanks to Helen Ortel and Kira Aubrey of GitLab and the rest of the GitLab team, which is a great partner for ATARG. Now, we want to get started. This afternoon, we're going to hear from our panelists, who will be followed by Q&A, a poll question or two, and then we're going to answer your questions. So I'd like to start with introducing our panelists. We have with us today Major General Catherine K.J. Johnson, who is or was formerly the Director of Logistics, Engineering, and Force Protection for the U.S. Air Force, and currently she serves as Senior Advisor to Moncton. We also have with us Annette Mitchell, who is the Federal DevOps Interagency Council Lead with the IRS. And we also have Amber Chowdhury, who is an entrepreneur and customer experience strategist and diversity advocate with the SBA. So I'd like to get started with asking a few questions to kind of help those panelists to introduce themselves. And what we want to do is I want to hear about each of you tell us about a time when you were an individual contributor or the leader of a small team and had an innovative idea for which you needed to gain support and approvals to execute. What did you learn, and what would you do again and differently in hindsight with all of that? So let's start with you, General, and tell us what you think.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Leader of teams and a time when I had to do some communication. I'll try to keep this short. We had tried to purchase in the Air Force a very large IT system that was supposed to be going across all the systems, kind of consuming up all of the old systems, and we had a failure. It didn't work, and we had to cancel that program. So that's the very short story of it. But so how did you communicate what we were going to do next? You know, we had to very quickly create a new strategy of what we were going to do to repair all of the disparate old systems, and then how we were going to roll that out across the Air Force logistics systems. So that was the project in a nutshell. And what I would do differently was communication is really key. Once that new strategy was settled upon and the Air Force had approved it, how do you communicate that, not just to the people that work for you and the people that are going to use that new strategy and use those new products, but how do you communicate that to your congressional members who are in it, for all intents and purposes, paying for this? You know, the DoD is paid for by our US taxpayers. And so how would you communicate that to those congressional members? I think that's probably what I would do differently, was do a better job of communicating what was the problem, why did we change course, and what we were going to do for the future. So that's kind of very quickly in a nutshell what I would do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Amber, could you tell us what you would do? Oh, what your background with that too? How were you an individual contributor or a leader of a small team? What was your innovative idea?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Amber Chowdhury. I'm the customer experience lead here at the Small Business Administration. I definitely started off as a one-woman show that kind of built my own position, given that customer experience and a lead for that position did not exist. So to explain my journey, I have to go back to 2017, 2018. I was detailed to lead the agency's rebranding, And so that was much more than a logo or getting our 68 district offices to sing from the same sheet of music of how they talk about SBA, but it was really about creating a customer-centric brand promise. And mind you, I'm not a marketing person, was just a project manager that was asked to do this from the administrators team. And so fresh off of that project, I was thinking to myself, well, now that we created this customer-centric brand promise, how do we actually deliver on that customer-centric brand promise? And so I actually decided that I was going to write a business case on why we should focus on customer experience and human-centered design and do that for de-risking IT technology projects. And so I wrote a business case, I did some market research, put out an RFI, put together a 20-page project plan, and I presented that to the administrator's chief of staff and then the CFO as, this is how we're going to do this, and this is how it's going to save you money while also simultaneously allowing us to meet our mission. And so they both signed off and granted me some money for the agency's first customer experience IDIQ. And so everyone always says, you know, you need to find your senior executive champions. And I think that's true, but what happened to me shortly after I got my money was that both the chief of staff and the CFO left the agency within a month of each other and a month after giving me the money. And so I think it's important to secure those senior executives, but I think when it comes to sustainable change, you have to think about how are you going to shift the culture and how is your vision going to stick? And so I realized after several of my senior executive champions leaving me that, you know, I'm going to have to do this bottom up as well. And so I created a CX community of practice. We have 300 members on our Yammer group, but at least 20 to 40 people show up every month to teach people how to do their own customer experience or human-centered design projects now. So that's me.
So the community aspect of building that consensus is really an important part of how you communicate your vision.
Yeah, definitely. I would focus on culture as much as possible.
Awesome. Annette Mitchell, can you answer that same question for us, please? Can you tell us about a time when you had an innovative idea and how you were able to bring that to fruition?
Yes, I'll speak in terms of the DevOps Federal Interagency Council, aka DFIC, which is a forum where quarterly the government agencies and the industries, we get together and discuss or collaborate on DevOps, aka DevSecOps and IT modernization issues. So back in 2018, and I remember the month, I don't know why, but it was actually on April the 8th, I was asked by one of our executives in management to lead the DFIC initiative. At that time, we had just a handful of individuals and strictly federal government agencies and just a few. We had approximately 20 in total. And as months went by, I waited, started envisioning or thinking about how we could actually expand DFIC. I thought it would be amazing and awesome to share our knowledge amongst a broader audience, and that audience being adding on some industries to our platform. However, I knew that in order for me to open that door for others, of course, I needed to gain approval from upper management and our executives in order to execute my idea. So in essence, my thought process was that this would be a win-win for all gov agencies and industries. This would create an opportunity that could allow us to expand our knowledge base. I'm a strong believer that learning from each other is the key and will always be the key to our successes. So needless to say, I received support. My idea was approved by our upper management, and to date, I'm proud to say we have approximately 300 agencies and industry DFIC members, and I love it. in terms of what I learned, I would say that when something comes across your mind, an idea, don't hesitate to share it or express it with others. Bring it to the table and discuss it with your colleagues to get their feedback. Then bring it to upper management. And as my grandmother used to say, nothing beats a trier but a failure. So that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, so there is a common thread I'm starting to hear here, and it appears that the collaboration is really a strong part of making things successful. So I want to get into a little bit more of that as we talk later, but let's talk about the sales process, the vision sales process. And my mother used to say, so we're gonna quote our elders here. My mother used to say, it's not sometimes what you say, but how you say that. So let's start at the beginning of the sales process. How the vision is communicated is probably the hardest, maybe the most critical part of the execution. So once someone's inspired to solve a problem or innovate in some way, or they have the idea for change, how would they structure that message, right, of the vision? What's the most effective way, the most crucial element? So let's talk about that in terms of style, and then talk about an actual practice, like communicating that. So General, can you start us off with that? How should someone communicate that vision to others?
Sure. I'm a fan of Simon Sinek, so I have always thought that the best way to communicate that is to start with the why are you doing this in the first place. I have found that you get kind of three groups of people. You've got the people who desire change and they're ready for it, they're hungry for it. You've got the people in the middle who are sort of ambivalent, and maybe that's a bad term, ambivalent, but they're kind of happy with the status quo. And then you've got the people in your organization, both above you and below you, who are going to have their heels dug in and they don't want change. So how do you get all three of those communities on board with you? And I think the most important thing is to start with the why are you doing this in the first place? What is the catalyst for change? What is the need for this change? And then once you have articulated that very clearly, then you can go about kind of getting everybody on board and on task, and you'll find that you'll have a much easier time. Like I said, the people that are hungry for change, they're already going to be on board no matter what. The people that are in the middle are going to easily be convinced. And then once you start with that, why do we need this? What is it for? What are we all working towards? That's when you're going to get those people who are maybe not so willing to change to get on board with you and to follow you and to want to do this thing, because obviously there's always going to be a lot of work involved. Anytime that you're in any organization facing any kind of change, it's a little scary for people, especially people who've been in an organization for a very long time and they're very used to doing things a certain way. I mean, every time you get a phone or an upgrade in your phone and you've got to relearn all the things that you have, it can be very frustrating. Wait, I used to have this app and it's not here anymore. Now it's over here. Just even simple things like that can be very, very frustrating for an organization. So when you start with the what are we doing and why are we doing it, the most important thing is the why.
That's a very good point. Highly would encourage anyone who hasn't read any of those books by Simon Sinek, or at least watch the videos, to do it and understand that why aspect and how important it is. So Amber, let's talk about your way of communicating with this one. You said before that you've created this community of practice. How has that impacted your spreading vision with your peers and executives? Can you talk about how you are now sharing messages and from a style and a practice perspective through that community?
Yeah, I think once you start penetrating the culture of an organization, it gets harder and harder to ignore that change, right? And so I would also echo starting with why, but also thinking about your senior executives. They want to know what's in it for me, right? And sometimes it's really easy to explain that. And, in the private sector, it's all about money and financial reasons. And sometimes it is easy to do that with estimated cost savings, but sometimes it's not, but the faster you can start figuring out, the what's in it for me, I think the better off people are with creating change and selling that vision as well.
Does that include, in your instance, of building maybe an ROI kind of business case on things?
Yes.
Have you found
Yeah.
that to be effective?
Yeah, definitely. I would say another thing with the community practice is there are more and more allies who are advocating for human-centered design and starting with that customer understanding. And so within my own office, in the Office of the Chief Information Officer, I have a lot of allies, right? I know that if I'm not in a senior leadership meeting, that I have the CTO, that I have the Chief Enterprise Architect, that I have the Director of Business Management Office advocating for human-centered design principles and user testing, customer experience analysis, and I don't have to be there anymore, which is fantastic. So the more you can find those allies, and I know it's a little bit harder to do in this pandemic, virtual environment, but planting those seeds and allies in the room is critical.
Okay, so we're hearing start with why, lining up your allies and getting those right people in the room to make those support decisions for you. And Annette, what are you going to tell us about this one? What did you learn from structuring the message in the right way?
I would like to echo off of Amber and the Major General KJ as well. Utilize the 5 W's and the H: the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how. Also stress cost savings and time. And IT related, the ability to deliver applications and services at a faster pace than using our traditional software development and infrastructure management processes. And also address, as Amber stated too, I love what she said as well, and that is what's in it for them. So in my mind, as long as you address or stress making your organization, your agency, your business a better place for the future, is what I would stress.
That's excellent. So you had a lot packed into that comment.
Right.
about making sure. So there's a factor here of numbers and making
Right.
sure that makes the organization with the efficiency, the speed to mission, those aspects that they need to make sure that they deliver what they're there for, the core of their mission. And what was that last point that you had? Can you reiterate that one again?
Making your organization or your agency or your business a better place for the future, but also remember the cost savings is critical.
Awesome. Okay. So in terms of, that kind of leads us into our next question too, about making things better for the future. So Amber, you were talking about being more customer centric and that design element of what you're doing. So those are that's one principle of DevOps, is that customer centric action, also creating with the end in mind, that leads organizations to innovate like lean startups, right? So how can government itself and organizations empower people to think and act like entrepreneurs, right? To create and deliver timely solutions that meet the needs of their customers and their mission, and they're thinking in the forward sense, as Annette just mentioned, in order to do that. So as an entrepreneur, how do you do that, Amber? I think we might have a little technical glitch on that part. Let's move that over to you, General, until Amber comes back. But how did you find ways to empower your organization to to deliver customer-centric action and creating with the end in mind as part of DevOps?
Sure, sure. So for the military, that's kind of a delicate balance. You know, I don't need or want people to go off and do all kinds of things on their own. But at the same time, you want to create an environment where people feel empowered to make suggestions and have their ideas heard, because there's always a better way to do something, even though we have very rigid methods. Like, for example, in aircraft maintenance, we have technical orders that we are very, very strict about following, because aircraft have to be maintained exactly the same way every time, no matter who touches that airplane, no matter where it is in the world. So, but the processes involved in that could be improved. For example, you know, you do a lot of Lean Six Sigma thinking about the process of how you do each task, and maybe you could change the order of the tasks to make them more efficient. And so you want to be able to listen to your people and take those suggestions about those efficiencies and then make that change across the entire organization once it's been vetted and approved, and that we've looked at it and said, okay, this really is a better, more efficient way to do things. But you got to be real careful, especially with the military, because we tend to be very rigid for a reason. So, but again, you want to spark that innovation, you want to spark that entrepreneurship, you want to have that ability for people to bring those ideas and thoughts and new ways of doing things forward, so that you can look at them across the entire organization and make those changes.
How did you let people know that their ideas were welcome? How did you share that so that you could encourage those thought processes and collaboration?
Well, there's a process for that. There's a form for that. You can fill out and make those changes that way. But you know, every commander, we have lots and lots and lots of people. I mean, there's 65,000 crew chiefs alone. And we have a very good chain of command that people can say, hey, this is what I think, and this is a way we can do things better. And every single individual commander, I think, does a pretty good job of listening to his folks, his and her folks, to look for those opportunities to make things better. You're always looking for a way to make your organization better, to make your organization more efficient, to make your organization faster, leaner, smarter, you know, and as each commander is out there talking to their people, they have an opportunity to bring those ideas forward.
Right. So you kind of put two things together too, how you're able to, as a leader, encourage people to do that. But then as people, part of bringing that, what's in it for me is how do I make things better? How do I make things faster? How do I help the mission come to fruition more quickly? How do I make things more secure? Right. So
yes,
those are
absolutely.
points that our listeners should really try to incorporate in their messaging, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Amber, you're back. So I'm not sure if you caught the question, but can you tell us about the core principles of DevOps is about, you know, customer-centric action, creating with the end in mind, you know, thinking like an entrepreneur. And so that is the role that you really hold. Can you tell us how government organizations, and you're coming from, you know, the civilian side, how they can create and deliver timely solutions, and they can empower their people to do that and meet the needs of their mission?
Yeah, one of the things that I always encourage people to do before starting the solutioning is figuring out your customers, period. First of all, who is your customer? Is your customer the employee, is a partner, or is it the private citizen, that external customer? And then once you have identified your customers, you need to figure out what is that customer's jobs to be done, meaning what are they actually trying to do? And one way to figure that out is to invite your customers and co-create with them by giving them a seat at the table. And with DevOps, one of the things that you can do, you know, it's really hard to see like agile teams purely agile, but one way is to make sure that you're doing that 2-week cadence with your customers and user testing. And just understanding, you know, your customers, how they interact with processes, how do they interact with current technology, how do they interact with current people, and understanding, you know, those three elements is really an outside-in approach to IT development. And at the end of the day, it helps de-risk technology investments. And well, you'll get a better product by giving your customers that seat at the table, whether it's that upfront work or if it's through end user testing as well. So I would say, you know, the Paperwork Reduction Act, it can be intimidating to some, but it's so worth it to once you have built that product and have something that everyone is happy with.
Excellent. Thank you. And Annette, how are you bringing in those DevOps principles into your organization? How is the IRS able to help bring in this more customer-centric approach?
For us or our agency, I would just caveat by saying providing training, you know, and of course, we have our higher ups, our execs, our ACIOs, our CTOs, sharing or showing their support.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful, thank you. And that's a good aspect of the cultural points that you all three brought up earlier, is, you know, making sure that you have training that brings this kind of thinking to bear. I think this might be a good time for us to bring in the poll. Is this a good time for this, Alyssa? I'm not sure if we can get that started now. All right, so our number one poll, our first poll is, where do you struggle most in communicating your vision? Is it in convincing your team to support the idea, in garnering support and resources from executives, in crafting your elevator pitch that's succinct and eloquent so that you can articulate that idea, or is it in the tone, timing, and delivery of the idea? So I'll give you just a moment to complete that poll, and then we'll talk about our results. All right, and here are our results here. So it looks like that most people are having more of a struggle with how to craft an elevator pitch. So making sure that that message is succinct and eloquent in order to get it out. I think we kind of discussed that before. I think when I was talking with each of you ladies individually before about the struggle to put that message in a way that other people can understand, but also be succinct about it. And I think that's important when you're getting those allies to also repeat that message. They need to be able to repeat your elevator pitch and be convincing for you. Any comments on that? And just pipe right in.
I'll comment. You know, as a former senior executive for the Air Force, the things that resonated most with me, if you can get something across in just a few sentences, not just verbally, if you're going to send your boss an email or a text message and you can't get across what it is you need, why you need it, and you know, very, very succinctly, what is the problem and what do you intend to do to solve it, in about 4 sentences, your boss probably does not have the time or the bandwidth to read a very long email till they can wade through and get to the crux of what it is you want. So put that bottom line up front, you know, in the front of your email. What is it you need right at the very beginning in just a couple of sentences, and I promise you, you'll have better luck with your senior executives, with your leaders, of how you of getting what you want done. Just by 2 cents.
So the word of the day, the bluff, the bottom line up front. So your executive summary at the beginning. Okay, Amber and Annette, do you have any comments too?
The Major General took those words out of my mouth. I just was going to say the bluff. And then, you know, storytelling is an art. And if you're having trouble doing that, maybe put together a diagram or some visuals. I think that also helps executives try to understand what you're trying to do as well. So if you can flesh that out, that would be awesome.
Okay, bottom line up front, visuals, diagrams. Okay, Annette.
I agree wholeheartedly with what was just said. I can't think of adding anything else to the comments that were made. So I agree.
Okay. All right. Well, our next question. So at GitLab, we found that in an environment where there's open collaboration, transparency, that's built on open source so that everyone can contribute, and where we're closely connected to the feedback of our users and customers, which are all fundamental aspects of the USDS digital playbook strategy, they're essential to driving innovation. So that's innovation for us, but also for our customers. So these values then of collaboration, open source, you know, transparency, et cetera, are ones that influence what we build and how we build them, and the initiatives we pursue. So that's influenced us, it influences our customers. How do you see the plays of the digital playbook affecting your organization's spirit of innovation and the progress towards digital transformation? So how is that influencing what you do in your agency? Amber, why don't you start?
Sure. So I think, you know, those are things, you know, when you boil all of those things, transparency, open collaboration, it all boils down to trust, right? And so being able to deliver on, you know, bringing people into the process, because at the end of the day, customers want to feel like they're part of the they want change, they want to be a part of the change, they don't want change to happen to them, right? And so I would just say it just comes down to just respecting that you're going to have to, in order to have that element of trust, those are the things that you're going to have to do. And that's how change really happens, right? Like when you think of successful change initiatives, those are the things that you need to be able to do. So
Trust. Very good. Annette,
Right.
you want to join in?
Yeah, and you know what? I also would like to say that it will definitely or can affect the whole trust, the whole being closely connected, collaborating with each other, the transparency. It will affect your organization's culture into a positive digital transformation, and processes being in alignment with your goals and your milestones.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. Jenna, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, I think Amber said it really well. When you talk about the change, what's your catalyst for change in the beginning? It's usually some kind of a need. It's about the customer, right? And if you aren't talking to the customer and trying to figure out what it is they need, what their requirement is, and, you know, you may think you've got a great idea. You may think you have a great solution. You may think you understand the problem, but you really ought to be talking to the end user to really figure out what it is that the problem is. I know for myself, when I was doing that type of work, I didn't want to be involved in it at all. I said, here's what the goal is. Here's what the end state is. Now go out there and go talk to the users and figure out what it is that they really think that they need. Here's my goal, my strategic level goal. And then you need to figure out how we're going to get from this strategic goal to be executed by talking to the users and the customers. And so I think that was a really good point, to talk about that first and foremost. What does the customers need? So
capturing the user requirement, but
right.
then also having the feedback loop so that you can continue to iterate through that whole process, so that you don't end up designing something that you thought they needed or over time as you're developing becomes something else. So you're
Right, it
able to
can't be
make those
static.
changes.
Right. Yeah.
Right,
It has to
very
be
dynamic.
dynamic and iterative. Yep.
Very good. All right, so before I want to make sure I can leave room for a couple questions if we need those today too. So let me ask you a few last questions here. Transformational shift, this is a two-part question. So transformational shifts are a function of both culture change, as we discussed, and as well as the technology adoption part of this one. So, you know, there's multiple pieces to it. With the lens of a female executive, and I just want to say this is the time for us to talk as ladies, you know, on this panel to other women out there. We have some uniquely distinctive ways of how we need to assert our leadership. And I'll say that blanketly here, that sometimes it's hard for women to establish ourselves as leaders simply because of the way society works. So there's some challenges to that, but you know, as leaders, how do we overcome that? How do we say our messages in a way that can be easily understood, but also respected and adopted and, you know, approved? So can you share your experience with organizational cultural change, sparking this transformational shift and building support, but in the context of women leadership? Anyone can jump in with this one, because I know that was a loaded question.
Yeah, it's, you know, I am probably one of the only women of color in the Office of Chief Information Office. And, you know, it's not unusual for me to be sitting in the meeting and being the only woman, or sitting in our Zoom or Teams meeting where there's 20 men and it's just little old me. And I think the way that I overcame that was very quickly. I was really sneaky about how I wanted my things to stick. And so we actually just recently this past fiscal year, went through a new IT strategic planning process. So we do it on a 2-year planning process. And I was like, you know, if I want to do some of these, you know, touchy-feely, emotional customer experience, human-centered design thing, then I'm going to bake it into the IT strategic plan. And so now I have an excuse for my vision, and I can always point out, oh, goal 1, put customers first, right? I always have something I can point back to, and I don't have to rely on anyone because it's baked into our IT strategic plan. Another sneaky thing that I'm doing right now is I'm changing our system development process, our SOP, to include human-centered design and customer journey mapping processes before we start any sort of development as well. And so that's what it goes back to, creating those allies, because I have talked to the director of the business management office who is redoing the SOP, and you betcha human-centered design and customer experience and all of that is going to be baked in. So I would encourage people to be sneaky about baking their vision into some of the hardwiring into the customers, into your office's culture as well.
So you're tying it back to the mission, and then it can't be argued with, right?
Nope, I always have something to point to.
All right, well, thank you. That's a very good point. All right, so ladies, Annette, General, either of you?
Sure, I'll jump in here. I have been doing this a very, very, very long time. Started this so many years ago. And I have almost always been the only woman in the room for many, many, many years, especially in the field of aircraft maintenance. You know, that's kind of a male dominated field. So what I found works for me is learning to be the expert. And if I wasn't the expert, I would continue to ask questions until I became the expert. And then when you're trying to transmit that vision or that problem solving to your leadership, you know, you can speak with authority. You know what the problem is backwards and forwards. You understand all the different steps that it's going to take to solve something. And when you're the expert, it's hard to be trifled with when you know what you're talking about. And so I would encourage everyone out there to continue to ask questions until you have all of the knowledge, skills, and ability that you need to be the expert on whatever it is you're talking about. And that's worked for me.
Love that. Love that. Annette.
I would say to always research and know exactly what it is that you need to talk about. And I, being a woman of color, and also, or let's just say this, being in a minority, whether you're a woman of color or whether or not you're the only female in the room, I think it is important for us to, first of all, research, know exactly what it is that you're talking about. Don't give a whole lot of blah, blah, blah. Although for me, I'll be honest with you, I love to give a whole lot of blah, blah, blah. I just think it's my persona in that, in speaking, I feel like I need to tell you this and tell you that and tell you this. However, a lot of that is not necessary or needed. And if you notice when men talk, they have a tendency of, and I remember an executive told me this a long time ago, and I take this to heart. He said, Annette, you know what? I love what you say. I love how you say it, but you know what? Let's just get to the point. Stress the importance and people will buy in. And I think from hearing that and learning from others, keeping my mouth shut, has done a lot for me. I've been very fortunate in that my agency has allowed me to, I've worked with just about every organization throughout the IRS. I have always dealt with our higher ups. They allow me to go out there and pretty much, as I use this word, and I heard this a long time ago, rock and roll. I know what needs to be said. I psychoanalyze, hear what needs to be said, especially as a woman. We need to pay attention, listen, know those buzzwords, know what to say, know how to say it, know when to say it in order to reel them in. And I, like Amber too, I'm a little bit sneaky because my dad used to say, keep your mouth shut, listen, Annette, learn. And then I kind of sort of sneak in a little bit about, or let me back up. I can sneak in those words, those buzzwords, or just stress the importance of why we need to do this, how we need to do this. And I'll say most of the time I'm able to reel them in. And if I get those smiley faces, or, well, right now we can't see each other unless we're doing Zoom, but most of the time it works for me. But if you can, one thing I've learned, and I know I'm doing it now, is just get to the point, say what needs to be said, and stress the importance of why we're doing what we're doing. And if you can save monies for your government agency, that will be the key to your success.
Well said. Thank you.
Can I also just add that, you know, it's easy to look over and say, well, why doesn't my mediocre male counterpart always have a faucet of money and I don't have that same luxury, right? But, you know, at the end of the day, it comes down to you can only control what you can control, right?
Exactly.
And you can control your own planning. And so putting together your project plans, putting together your WBS, and making sure that when a senior executive asks you for why, you have all of the information in front of you. And so, you know, not looking over or playing the blame game, but just making sure that you have your own house in order, I think, probably the way to go.
Right.
So being prepared and having your message down. So we're back to that same sort of thing we mentioned before. Well, how are you seeing technology as an enabler of getting that vision and innovation throughout an organization? You know, perhaps with your collaboration, with your, you know, collecting the ideas, you know, all those sort of things that go into the entire process from idea to delivery. How are you using technology to help you do that?
I would say for us, it is utilizing our CI/CD pipeline, our continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline.
Mhm. And that certainly accelerates getting your mission out the door.
Exactly.
Mhm. And ladies, do you have any other comments on that one? I know we have a few more minutes. I want to make sure we get all your thoughts in here as much as possible without cutting you off. But
there's so many methods of communication now that weren't out there before. I mean, you have all kinds of chat rooms, and you have email, and you have Facebook, and I mean, there's just so many different means of communicating to your organization what's happening, and getting that feedback loop going. I mean, you can use LinkedIn, you can use, I mean, there's just so many different things that I think that's both a plus and a minus. You know, I think because you have so many different means of communication, you can also be flooded by that as well, both in both directions. But I think if you manage that, you can probably come out a winner and use those things, those means of communication and technology to your advantage in order to get your communications across.
you know, we found that having a single source of truth to both collect the user requirements, to work through all of the iterations of your idea, to actually, you know, do the development, all the aspects of that, using it for CI/CD, but also having that the user feedback loop in the process in order to get things out. It's kind of keeping all of that information and your repository information all together is helpful, extremely helpful, because you don't have things everywhere. You're not using all sorts of different tools. So if you can kind of figure out what you're trying to do in one place, it certainly helps to eliminate the confusion and also help you to get more quickly to your goal. So I want to drop in another poll here too that talks about the technology a little bit and see what our listeners are finding as well. So if we can cue up that poll, and we're going to see how they're using technology to spread and execute your vision. So are you using it to research and collect requirements, to initially communicate an idea, to socialize and refine the idea and collect feedback and approvals, or to collaborate on the execution and delivery, or perhaps even for other things? So let's leave that up for a moment too and see where we are. Aha. Okay, so we have a large number of people who are using it, technology to do their collaboration and execution on delivery, followed by socializing and collecting the feedback and approval. So using that as part of their process for development. Any comments here on that, Amber, perhaps? I'm calling you out. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I was
just
responding to some of the questions in the chat. What was the question?
Okay. I'm wondering if you had any comments on the poll results here about how people are using technology to spread their vision.
I don't see the poll. Sorry. Maybe somebody else can take that.
General or Annette, did you have any comments on the poll, or? It might just be popping up for me, so we can skip that because I do have another couple of questions and I don't want to run out of time altogether. But thank you everyone for answering that poll. So one of the challenges I think that everyone is facing right now, when so many of us are working remotely, is how do you get the opportunity to influence people when you're not standing around the water cooler, you're not able to go out to lunch, you can't just drop by somebody's office. How are you doing that? How are you influencing projects, programs, even agency direction? Anyone pop in with that one?
I would say right now what a lot of us are doing is using Zoom, using WebEx, using Skype, utilizing the technologies that are out there that are available to allow us to communicate or share ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the SBA, when we were in headquarters, we're just like a small high school where we all know each other. It was nice to go from floor to floor and see those familiar faces. But during the pandemic, I would encourage people not to give up on their interpersonal relationships, because that's really how you get things done sometimes. And so popping in for, a quick one-on-one to see how folks are doing, just lunch meetings virtually as well, just getting a group of folks from different offices to just chat on strategic vision and planning. I think that's so underrated, but being able to keep that connection alive is still very important.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it is exceedingly hard to read a room full of people on Zoom. It's just so much easier when you're face to face to read body language, to understand whether what you're communicating is actually getting across, to be able to tell. You can tell when someone is not agreeing with you with what you're saying by the way that the way that they're carrying themselves. And it's so difficult to do on Zoom and on chats and things like that. So I mean, this is the best we've got for today. That this is kind of the hand that we're dealt. I don't see a way around it, but boy, from my perspective, it'd be great when this is over and people can get back to normal business meetings where they can actually discuss something face to face. And sometimes there's a lag in the communication when you're doing something on Zoom. One person's talking and another person's talking over them or something. It can be very, very challenging. So I'll be personally quite glad when this is over.
I agree.
I think there's something to be said for the intentionality of reaching out and making relationships, and spending some time doing that because you can't do it in person. So we talked earlier about building trust. So knowing that you're going to build or be launching an idea, is this, how do you feel about reaching out to people and building those allies even during this time, which is not going away anytime soon, right? And maybe doing what we do internally is we do coffee chats. There may not be any particular reason for you to have a talk with someone, but able to set some time aside just to get to know someone and build a rapport, so that when you need conversations later on, you're able to, easily have those conversations that help you to, maybe launch an initiative or discuss that with a person. Are you finding those things to be helpful as well? Yes.
I would agree. Yes.
Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Okay. Well, so we have a few minutes left here. I would love to hear kind of a closing statement from each of you, a couple of minutes about if you were going to sit here with me and just say, you have 2 minutes to pour wisdom into me. So I'll be your proxy, and all of our listeners are listening here. Can you pour into us what you would advise if we are a leader of one or a small team leader, and we want to, as women, be successful in launching an idea and getting that buy-in? We've talked about so many things, but give me in a nutshell your message.
I would say,
Jump in.
go ahead,
Go
Major.
ahead.
No, go ahead, Major. That's fine. Let the Major speak.
I just want to add one thing to everything that we've said here today, and that is listen to your people. You do not, I said, you got to be an expert on something. How do you get to be the expert? You got to be the expert by talking to your folks. Because you can't possibly have done every single job in the organization or know every single aspect of the organization or every single problem of the organization. The only way to be the expert on that is to talk to your folks, because every one of those people is going to have a slice of the information that you need, a slice of the bigger picture, and then you can put those things together and enable yourself to get a better vision of how you want the organization to go.
All right. Very good. I love that.
So this is really funny because last night one of my former interns just called me was telling me that she wants to look for a new job because her supervisor was throwing her under the bus or not listening to her. And my response to her was, you're very early on in your career. And, if you feel like it's impacting your mental health, then yeah, no job is ever worth that. However, since you're so new to the workforce, I would encourage you to build your resiliency, because you're not going to get yes all the time. Someone is going to tell you no, and maybe it's not a no, maybe it's maybe later, right? And so building that resiliency, I think, and not giving up is something that everyone should do.
I love that, because we're in a place where you have to understand that obstacles and challenges aren't necessarily dead ends or stop signs. They're simply, let's find a way around it and be, as you were mentioning, being strategic and finding alternate paths. And so that's probably one of the core lessons I would want to take away from this personally, is just to make sure that you are sticking with it and being strategic and not giving up. All right, Miss Mitchell.
Yes, and I will say, don't ever let anyone tell you or make you feel as though you can't achieve. Always hold your head up. Know that you're great, you're powerful, you make a difference. Communication, communication, communication. And as my father used to say, it's not what you say, but how you say it. And we all need to think about the words that we use or what you say before you say it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Own up to your mistakes, because God knows I make them. We all make them. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. And that's how we all become awesome leaders. Your words, your guidance, your leadership makes an powerful difference in your personal and your professional life.
I love that. That was wonderful. Thank you, all three of you ladies, for the incredible wisdom that you have shared with us today. I can't wait to go back and listen to the recording for this, because it's been a great mentoring session for me to listen to, but I know for everyone that's here, they gained a lot as well. So thank you again for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. But unfortunately, it's all the time we have today, and ITARC would like to thank you, all of our attendees today, and also GitLab for being an amazing partner for this webinar. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you tomorrow at ITARC's Thursday after lunch IT webinar series, where we're going to dive into the identity and access management, data analytics, and artificial intelligence, and why they're important components of today's digital transformation effort within the federal government. So thank you again, and we hope to see you again tomorrow. Have a great day.